Welcome to Bible Study Insights with BibleStudyCam, and I'm BibleStudyCam, and I want to welcome you to this live stream broadcast. Whether you're tuning in on Twitter or Periscope at BibleStudyCam, whether you're on Facebook.com/reflective Bible Study, whether you're on YouTube at The Online Preacher, or even at theonlinepreacher.com/live, wherever you happen to be tuning in, whether this is on live or on replay, I want to welcome you to this live stream event. And this morning we're going to be concluding our focus on Matthew chapter 25, the parable that Jesus gives about the three servants, each of whom is given a different message, or a different amount of money, a different size of a bag of silver, you could say. And this morning I want to conclude this parable and unpack an amazing challenge that Jesus shares from it. But before we do that, about an hour and a half ago, I jumped on live stream with a question because this next week, I'm going to be headed back to work in the whole opening, a reopening of society, at least in the area that I live. And we're going to be going back to work, and that presents a problem for this live stream. Because the general time that I record this live stream is when I'm headed into work. The exact time that I would be driving into work is when this live stream is happening. But it's not wise or advisable for me to be driving and live streaming at the same time. So we had a couple of options, and one option would be that I just take a break and stop doing these live streams. Another option would be that I pre-record a message and release it at this time to keep the consistency there. And the third option that I have is that we could move this live stream to be earlier, say maybe about an hour or an hour and a half prior to this, and then we could continue it live. So wherever or whichever option you think that you might be more interested in, jump into any one of the comments areas, whether it's on Twitter, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, anywhere you see a comment box, jump in and let me know, because I want these little Bible study insights that I've discovered to be beneficial to you. And with that said, let's wrap up this parable that Jesus shares. Let me read the full parable, but then we'll focus in on how this parable ends. So this is Matthew chapter 25. We're going to start in verse 14, and I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. Then he left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with the 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more." The master was full of praise. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, and now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant, and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the ground. Look, here is your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least then I could have gotten some interest on it." And that is where we left off last week, or last week. That's where we left off yesterday morning. But let's conclude this parable and discover Jesus' big spiritual idea. Verse 28, then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given in abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now the way this parable ends is challenging. It almost seems unfair because the master says, take the one bag of silver from the one servant and take it away from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags, the one who started with 5 and invested it and got 5 more. So he has 10 bags, and now after this parable, he gets 11. And some might be quick to say, that is ridiculously unfair. But Jesus here is sharing a spiritual principle, as well as a monetary principle, you might say, that the people who invest well, they get richer. But those who don't invest well or don't do anything wise with their money, they end up losing the little money that they have. And that's challenging because that seems unfair by almost any way that you could define fairness. But there's a spiritual truth at play here that is bigger than all of the money discussions. The money discussions challenge us with the observation that those who invest wisely, they could start poor, but they invest wisely, they become rich. And if they continue investing wisely, then they will continue getting richer. But the reverse is also true, because it's a challenge that those who may start with a lot of money and they don't invest well, they start with a lot of money and they do nothing, that money is going to trickle away till they have nothing. That's a spiritual truth that has nothing to do with being rich or poor, with any individual who has riches or individual who doesn't have any money. It's a challenge, it's a truth, it's a perspective that changes how we should view money. I heard a pastor, I believe it was Andy Stanley, though, if it was Andy Stanley, he said he heard it from someone else, that he had this truism, you could say, this oversimplification that was used to make a point that there are 2 types of people in the world. Those who make interest and those who pay interest. Those who earn interest or those who pay interest. And while it's a vast oversimplification when compared with reality, this truth challenges us, this idea, this thought experiment challenges us with the notion that would we rather be someone who makes interest or who pays it? I know if you're anything like me, I would rather make interest, but when I say that, it challenges me to then push myself to figure out where and how is the best and wisest way to make interest. And one of those ways of making interest is to make sure that you're paying as little interest as possible so that the interest you make can be kept. But since this is a spiritual illustration, this is a Jesus parable, it extends way beyond money. This spiritual parallel or parable, you could even say, could extend all the way to heaven. Because we could ask ourselves a similar question, that's how are we investing the blessings that God has given us into heaven? How are we blessing our time, our talents, our money into growing God's kingdom? And that's a challenging thought. I know that, at least in my own life, that I've not been the best at using my money or my talents or my skills wisely, but I continuously try to keep moving forward and keep getting better. But with that said, I also know that challenging and sharing what I've learned can be beneficial and helpful to others, and so that's why I do it. And I invest in heaven by helping other people, not by trying to get other people to believe the same as I do, because what you believe is between you and God. But I do believe that it would be a disservice to you as it would be a disservice to me if you knew something that you believe would benefit me, and I knew something that I believe would benefit you, and we didn't share it with one another. And the sharing of it isn't because we're wanting to convince each other to change what we believe, but it's because we value each other. I value you, and I hope that you value me, to challenge us so that together we can grow, and together we can invest in God's kingdom. And so that's why I do all of my sharing online, whether it's these live streams, the blog posts or the podcasts, because I do all of that stuff too. But it's to invest in heaven as a direct response, you could say, to the challenge that Jesus gives in this parable. And that's what I want to share with you this morning. That's what I wanted to draw our attention to, is that it is vitally important what we spend our money on, what we invest our money in, that we do something. But it's also vitally important that we take the blessings and the talents and the time and the energy that God has blessed us with and invest it in heaven. So whether you're tuning in on Twitter or Periscope at BibleStudyCam, whether you're on Facebook.com/Reflective Bible Study, whether you're on YouTube at The Online Preacher, or even at theonlinepreacher.com/live, wherever you're tuning in, first off, thank you for tuning in. I know that this live Periscope has gone a little bit, or live stream I should say, has gone a little bit longer than many of the others. But I want to thank you for tuning in, and jump into any one of the comments to give an answer to the question I shared earlier of, would you like these live streams to continue? Because next week I'm going to be headed back to work. And if you'd like to see me continue doing these, just let me know how. Would you like them at this time, even though they might be pre-recorded and there might not be as much interaction? Or would you like them to be a little bit earlier and keep having a live feel, and a live feel that you could answer or ask and get answers to questions about what we've been studying or about other Bible topics or thoughts? And so whether you want these to continue or you just want to say, hey, no, I'm good, don't worry about continuing, jump into any one of the comment boxes and let me know, because as we continue moving forward, as the world slowly might go back to what could be considered a new normal, let's together keep our hearts and our minds and our perspectives focused beyond today and onto eternity. So thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing your responses as we keep this conversation going. I'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully as we move into the coming week. Have a great Saturday, May 2nd.